in the year 1705, in a settlement so remote that most maps did not bother to include it. A woman did something that had never been done before. She painted her lips with tomatoes, not because she was hungry, not because she was playing, not because she had any reason that the people around her could understand. She did it because she had discovered something about color, something about attention, something about the way human beings look at each other and what happens when they cannot look away. This is the story of that discovery. It is a story about a woman named Sarah, who lived alone at the edge of a dark forest, who grew tomatoes when everyone around her believed they were poison, who crushed them with her bare hands and painted the juice on her mouth, and watched as the world began to change around her. It is a story about what happened to the people who looked at her, and it is a story about what looked back. If you have ever found yourself staring at something longer than you intended, if you have ever been unable to look away from a face, a color, an image that seemed to pull you in against your will, then you need to hear this story, because the forces that shape your attention did not begin with screens or algorithms or the glowing devices that fill your days. They began much earlier, in a garden, with a woman and a color so powerful that once you see it, you cannot look away. Settle in, make yourself comfortable, turn off the lights if you want. Let the darkness surround you, because this story lives in the darkness, and it wants you to listen. The settlement was called Hollow Falls, though there were no falls, and the hollow was shallow at best. It was a collection of perhaps 50 families, scattered along a dirt track that wound through the forest and connected to other settlements, other tracks, other tiny outposts of human life in the vast and empty wilderness of Northern America. The people of Hollow Falls were farmers and hunters and trappers. They lived hard lives, short lives, lives measured in seasons and harvests, and the long, crushing winters that came every year without fail. They worked from dawn until dark, and then they worked some more, because in a place like this, rest was a luxury that could kill you. They had no time for curiosity, no time for wonder, no time for stories. But they had stories anyway. Stories about the forest. Stories about things that moved in the dark. Stories about women who lived alone and grew things that should not grow. And they had a story about Sarah. Sarah had arrived in Hollow Falls 12 years before this story begins. She had walked out of the forest on an autumn afternoon, her clothes torn, her hands bleeding, her eyes wide with something that looked like fear, but was not quite fear. Something else. She was young then, perhaps 20, perhaps younger. It was hard to tell because her face had a stillness to it, a quietness that made age meaningless. She carried a small bundle on her back. Inside the bundle were a few possessions: a change of clothes, a knife, a small clay pot sealed with wax. She did not speak for 3 days after she arrived. she simply sat by the fire in the home of the village elder, a man named Thomas Gray, and stared into the flames as if she was seeing something there that no one else could see. On the fourth day, she spoke. "I need land," she said. "A place to build, a place to plant." Thomas Gray asked her where she came from. She did not answer. He asked her what she was running from. She did not answer. He asked her if she had family, friends, anyone who might be looking for her. She looked at him then, and her eyes were so empty, so still, so unlike anything he had ever seen, that he stopped asking questions. He pointed to the edge of the settlement, where the forest pulled back and the ground was flat, and a small stream ran clear and cold. It was far from the other houses, far from the center of things, but Sarah nodded and said it would do. She built her house with her own hands. It took her 3 months. She cut the trees herself, dragged them to the site herself, shaped them herself. She mixed mud and moss to chink the gaps between the logs. She split shingles for the roof. She built a stone fireplace that drew smoke better than any in the settlement. The villagers watched from a distance. They offered help. She refused. They brought food. She accepted with a small nod, but no thanks, no smile, no warmth. She was a strange one, they said. Strange but harmless. They did not know yet how wrong they were. The first year, Sarah planted a small garden. Potatoes, beans, squash, the usual things. She harvested enough to get through the winter. She did not ask for help. She did not complain. She simply existed at the edge of their awareness, a presence they noted but did not think about. The second year, the garden grew a little larger. To understand what Sarah discovered, you must first understand something about the human brain. The human brain is not a logical machine. It is not a calculator or a computer or a thing that processes information in an orderly way. It is a survival organ designed over millions of years to do one thing above all others: notice what matters. And nothing matters more to a survival organ than red. Red means blood. Red means injury. Red means danger. Red means that something is happening that requires your immediate attention. But red also means something else. Red means ripe fruit. Red means food. Red means that something is ready to be eaten, ready to provide the energy and nutrients that keep you alive. The brain cannot afford to ignore red. It is wired to look, wired to pay attention, wired to remember. When a hunter sees blood on the ground, his brain floods with chemicals that sharpen his senses and prepare his body for action. When a gatherer sees a red berry among green leaves, her brain releases dopamine that makes her feel pleasure and satisfaction. Red is not just color. Red is signal. Red is message. Red is the oldest language in the world, and Sarah had learned to speak it. She did not understand the science, of course. She did not know about dopamine or survival instincts or the ancient wiring of the human brain. She only knew that when she painted her lips with tomato juice, people looked at her differently. They looked longer. They looked deeper. They looked in a way that made her feel powerful. So she kept doing it. Every evening, just before sunset, she walked through her garden and harvested the reddest tomatoes she could find. She carried them into her house. She crushed them with her hands. She mixed the juice with something from the small clay pot she had carried out of the forest 12 years before. And then she painted her lips. The mixture from the clay pot was the key. She had brought it with her from wherever she came from, and she guarded it with her life. No one knew what was in it. No one ever would. But whatever it was, it did something to the tomato juice. It made it thicker, made it shinier, made it cling to her skin in a way that ordinary juice could not. And it made the red last, not just for hours, not just for days, forever. The color on Sarah's lips never faded, never cracked, never changed. It remained exactly as it was the moment she applied it, deep and rich and impossible to ignore. The villagers did not know about the clay pot. They only saw the red, and the red was enough. In the 12th year of Sarah's residence in Hollow Falls, a young woman named Rebecca decided to follow her home. Rebecca was 20 years old. She had lived in Hollow Falls her entire life. She knew everyone, and everyone knew her. She was practical, sensible, not given to flights of fancy or superstitious fears. But she could not stop thinking about Sarah's lips. The color haunted her. She saw it when she closed her eyes. She dreamed about it at night. She woke in the morning with the image burned into her mind, red on darkness, red on nothing, red that would not fade. She had to know. She waited until sunset, when the light was long and golden, and the world seemed to hold its breath. She watched from behind a large oak as Sarah walked through her garden, moving slowly between the rows of tomato plants, a woven basket on her arm. Sarah harvested only the reddest tomatoes, the deepest red, the color of something that had absorbed every possible ray of sun. Then she carried them into her house. The door closed. The lantern inside flickered to life. Rebecca waited until the last light faded from the sky. Then she crept forward, keeping low, moving through the tall grass like something that did not want to be seen. The house was small, one room with a loft. The windows were covered with oiled paper, but the paper was old and cracked in places, letting thin slivers of light escape into the darkness. Rebecca found a crack near the corner of the house. She pressed her eye to it and held her breath. Inside, Sarah stood at a wooden table. The basket of tomatoes sat beside her. A fire burned low in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the walls. Sarah worked slowly, carefully. She took tomatoes one by one and placed them in a wooden bowl. Then she crushed them with her hands. The sound was wet, thick, the pop of bursting skin, the squelch of pulp giving way, the drip of juice falling back into the bowl. Rebecca watched as the bowl filled with red, as Sarah's hands became stained, as the color rose higher and higher. When all the tomatoes were crushed, Sarah stopped. She looked at her hands. Then she reached for a small clay pot on the shelf behind her. She opened it and dipped her fingers inside. When she pulled them out, they were coated with something dark, something that gleamed in the lantern light. She mixed this dark substance into the bowl of crushed tomatoes. The red changed instantly. It became deeper, richer. It seemed to absorb the light around it, to drink it in, to become something that was not quite liquid and not quite solid. Rebecca leaned closer, trying to see what was in the clay pot. But before she could, Sarah looked up, directly at the window, directly at the crack where Rebecca was watching. Rebecca's heart stopped. She could not move, could not breathe, could not look away. Sarah smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was not a warning smile. It was something else, something that said, "I know you are there. I have always known, and I have been waiting." Then Sarah lowered her gaze to the bowl. She dipped her fingers into the red mixture. Slowly, deliberately, she painted it across her lips. The color was impossible. Deeper than blood, richer than wine. It seemed to glow from within, to pulse with its own light, to reach through the darkness and the crack in the wall and touch something deep inside Rebecca. Sarah looked at the window again, and she whispered something. Rebecca could not hear the words, but she felt them in her bones, in her blood, in the deepest part of her where thoughts begin. The whisper was not for her. It was for something else, something that listened, something that answered. From somewhere inside the house, Rebecca heard a sound, a low murmur like voices far away, like many people speaking at once from a great distance. It came from nowhere and everywhere. It seemed to vibrate in the wood of the house, in the ground beneath her feet, in the air itself. And then silence, complete and absolute silence. No rustling leaves, no insects, no wind, no sound at all except the pounding of her own heart. Rebecca ran. She did not stop running until she reached her own door, her own fire, her own mother's arms. She did not sleep that night. She did not speak for 3 days. And when she finally did speak, she said only one thing. She said, "Do not look at her lips." But it was too late. Everyone had already looked, and everyone had already been changed. The change was subtle at first, so subtle that no one noticed it happening. People simply found themselves thinking about Sarah more often, wondering what she was doing, wondering what she was thinking, wondering if she was alone in that small house at the edge of the forest. They found excuses to walk past her property. They invented reasons to speak with her. They brought her small gifts, not because she needed them, but because they wanted to see her, wanted to be near her, wanted to feel the pull of that red for just a moment longer. Sarah accepted everything with that small, private smile, and the red on her lips deepened further. Then the disappearances began. The first to go was a man named Joseph. Joseph was a farmer, married, 4 children. A solid, reliable man who had never given anyone cause for worry. He worked his land from dawn until dark, went to church on Sundays, drank moderately, spoke rarely, and loved his family with a quiet steadiness that everyone admired. One evening, he did not come home. His wife, Elizabeth, waited until dawn. Then she went to Sarah's house. Sarah opened the door. "Joseph is not here," she said. "He left. He had things to do." Elizabeth looked at Sarah's lips. Just for a moment, just a glance. But that moment was enough. "Of course," Elizabeth said. "I understand." She walked away. She did not ask again. She did not wonder where her husband had gone. She simply forgot. The second to go was a young man named William. William was 22, unmarried, strong and healthy, and full of the restless energy of youth. He had been seen near Sarah's property several times in the weeks before his disappearance, loitering at the edge of her garden, watching her work. His mother went to Sarah's house. Sarah opened the door. "William is not here," she said. "He left. He had things to do." The mother looked at Sarah's lips. Just for a moment, just a glance. "Of course," she said. "I understand." She walked away. She did not ask again. The third to go was a widow named Martha. Martha was 55. Her husband had died 3 years before, and she had lived alone ever since, surviving on her small garden and the kindness of neighbors. She was a quiet woman, a sad woman, a woman who had nothing left to lose. She went to Sarah's house one evening and did not come out. No one went looking for her. The fourth was a girl of 14 named Hannah. Hannah was the daughter of a farmer. She had been seen near Sarah's garden, watching the tomatoes grow, watching the red fruit ripen, watching the woman who tended them with such care. Her mother went to Sarah's house. Sarah opened the door. "Hannah is not here," she said. "She left. She had things to do." The mother looked at Sarah's lips. Just for a moment, just a glance. "Of course," she said. "I understand." She walked away. She did not ask again. Over the following months, more people disappeared. Men and women both, young and old. They went to Sarah's house at sunset and did not come out. Or if they came out, they were different, quieter, more distant. Their eyes had a look that had not been there before. A look that reminded the other villagers of something they could not quite remember, something they did not want to remember. And always, always, their gaze would drift to Sarah's lips when she passed. The color was almost black now, black with red beneath it, red that glowed like embers, red that pulled and would not let go. The villagers stopped asking questions. They stopped wondering. They simply accepted. Sarah was the center now, the heart, the thing thing they all turned toward without knowing they were turning. Her words shaped their decisions. Her opinions became their own. Her presence filled their thoughts even when she was not there. They did not notice this happening. That was the most terrifying part. They did not notice at all. One evening, the village elder decided to confront Sarah. His name was Thomas Gray. He was the same man who had taken her in 12 years before, who had given her land, who had watched her transform from a frightened girl into something else entirely. He was 72 years old now, white-haired and stooped, but his mind was still sharp, and his eyes still saw things that others missed. He had watched the changes in his village with growing unease. He had seen the disappearances, the blank looks, the way people's eyes followed Sarah wherever she went. He remembered old stories, stories his grandmother had told him when he was a boy. Stories about women who could make men forget themselves, who could bend minds with a glance, who could paint their lips with something that was not quite paint and not quite poison. He had never believed those stories. Until now, he went to Sarah's house at sunset. He knocked on her door. She opened it. For a moment, Thomas forgot why he had come. The red on her lips filled his vision, filled his mind, filled everything. He could not look away, could not think, could not speak. But he was old, and old minds are harder to bend. He forced himself to look down, to look at his own hands, to remember his own name. "Sarah," he said, "what are you doing to my people?" Sarah smiled, that small, private smile. "I am not doing anything," she said. "They are doing it to themselves." "What is that on your lips?" "This," she touched her mouth gently. "This is just color, just red. The same red that grows in my garden, the same red that has always been there." "It is not the same," Thomas said. "I have seen red before. This is different." "Yes," Sarah said, "it is different." She stepped back from the door. "Would you like to see how it is made?" Thomas hesitated. Every instinct told him to leave, to run, to never look back. But he was old, and old minds are also curious. He stepped inside. The door closed behind him. The lantern inside flickered, and the village waited. Inside the house, Thomas saw things he would never forget. The wooden table where Sarah worked, the bowl stained red from years of use, the clay pot on the shelf, its contents dark and gleaming, and on the walls, drawings, dozens of drawings, crude but clear, figures of women with red lips, their arms outstretched, their eyes empty, figures of men kneeling before them, figures of something else, something that was not human, something that watched from the edges of the drawings with eyes that had no color at all. "What are these?" Thomas whispered. Sarah did not answer. She walked to the table. She picked up a tomato from the basket. She held it out to him. "Look," she said, "really look." Thomas looked at the tomato. It was red, deep red, the red of blood, of life, of something that had grown in the sun and absorbed its light. "Now look at me," Sarah said. Thomas looked at her lips. The red was the same, exactly the same shade, the same depth, the same impossible richness. But it was different too. It moved, not visibly, not in a way he could see, but he felt it move, felt it reach toward him, felt it touch something inside him that had never been touched before. "Red is not just color," Sarah said. "It is door. It is invitation. It is the thing that calls to what waits in the dark." "What waits?" Thomas asked. Sarah smiled. "You are about to find out." She dipped her fingers into the bowl. She painted more red on her lips. The color deepened further, became almost liquid, almost alive. And then she whispered, the same whisper that Rebecca had heard through the crack in the wall. The same sounds, the same impossible language, the same words that should not have been possible for a human throat to make. From somewhere in the house, something answered. Thomas heard it, felt it. The low murmur, the many voices speaking at once, the vibration in the wood and the ground and the air. He tried to run, tried to move, tried to do anything. But the red held him, held his eyes, held his mind, held his soul. And then the something that had answered stepped forward. Thomas never spoke again. 3 days later, his daughter went to Sarah's house. Sarah opened the door. "Thomas is not here," she said. "He left. He had things to do." The daughter looked at Sarah's lips, just for a moment, just a glance. But that moment was enough. "Of course," the daughter said. "I understand." She walked away. She did not ask again. She did not wonder where her father had gone. She simply forgot. Winter came. The snow fell deep, and the cold settled in, and the village turned inward. Each family huddled in their own house, burning wood and eating stored food and waiting for spring. Sarah's house was dark. No smoke rose from her chimney. No light glowed through her windows. No footprints led to her door. Some noticed, most did not. When spring came and the snow melted, the villagers emerged into the light. They stretched and blinked and remembered how to be outside. Sarah's garden was already growing. Tomato plants, green and strong, pushing up through the thawing soil. Dozens of them, hundreds, covering every inch of cleared land. But Sarah was not there. Her house was empty. Her bed was cold. Her few possessions sat untouched on their shelves. She was gone. The villagers searched. They looked in the forest. They asked at other settlements. They sent word along the trading routes that passed through the region. No one had seen her. No one knew where she had gone. But the tomatoes grew. Year after year, the garden produced. Without anyone tending it, without anyone planting or watering or weeding. The plants came back every spring, thicker and stronger than before, their fruit redder and brighter than any tomatoes in the region. And on certain evenings, just before sunset, people swore they saw something moving among the rows. A figure, a woman, red lips that shone in the dying light. Then the figure would fade, and the light would fail, and the garden would be empty again. And the color on your lips, the red that catches light and holds attention and makes people look whether they want to or not, carries that knowledge with it. Every time, every application, every glance, the scientists have another word for what Sarah discovered. They call it the red effect. Studies show that men find women more attractive when they wear red. Studies show that women are perceived as more competent, more confident, more memorable when their lips are painted that particular shade. Studies show that red increases heart rate, increases attention, increases desire. The scientists explain this with evolution, with biology, with the ancient connection between red and fertility, red and readiness, red and the deepest drives of the human animal. But the scientists were not there. They did not see Sarah in her garden, crushing tomatoes with her bare hands, painting her lips with a mixture that should never have been made. They did not hear the whispers. They did not feel what the villagers felt when that red caught their eyes and would not let go. They did not watch people walk into a small wooden house at sunset and never walk out again. The scientists have their explanations, but the old women, the ones who still remember the warnings, they have something else. They have the truth, and the truth is this: red is not just color. Red is door. Red is invitation. Red is the thing that calls to something in the dark, something that has always been there, something that waits for the right shade, the right mixture, the right moment to answer. Sarah found that shade. Sarah made that mixture, and something answered. The psychologists will tell you that the red effect is natural, biological, harmless, but they do not explain why people who wear certain reds sometimes feel different, feel watched, feel like there is something just beyond the edge of vision, waiting. They do not explain why some women report dreams after wearing a particular shade. Dreams of gardens, of tomatoes, of a woman with red lips who speaks in a language that should not exist. They do not explain because they cannot explain, because the explanation is not in their laboratories or their studies or their peer-reviewed journals. The explanation is in the old stories. The explanation is in the warnings. The explanation is in the garden that still grows, somewhere, in a place no one goes, where tomatoes cover the ground like rivers of red, and a woman walks among them at sunset, her lips the color of something that should never have been seen by human eyes. Now think about this video. Think about why you are still here. Think about what kept you watching, what kept you listening, what made you scroll down to read the comments or click on the next video when this one ends. Was it the story itself, the words, the telling, or was it something else, something ancient, something hungry, something that wants to look and cannot stop looking, wants to know and cannot stop knowing, wants to stay and cannot leave? people who design the platforms you use every day know about this hunger. They feed it. They exploit it. They build entire systems around keeping you watching, keeping you scrolling, keeping you here. They call it engagement. They call it retention. They call it growth. But those are just words. The truth is older than words. The truth is a woman in a garden, painting her lips with the juice of crushed tomatoes, discovering that the right color at the right moment could do more than attract. It could hold. It could keep. It could control. The psychologists have studied the red effect for decades. They have published thousands of papers. They have built entire careers on understanding why red makes people look, makes people want, makes people remember. But they have never asked the question that matters most. They have never asked, who taught us to use red this way? Who discovered that painting the lips could change the mind? Who first looked at a tomato, at its deep red skin, at the pigment that seemed almost alive, and thought, this belongs on my mouth? The answer is lost now, buried under centuries of progress and science and forgetting. But the old stories say the answer was a woman alone, a woman who grew tomatoes when no one else would, a woman who crushed them with her bare hands and painted her lips with the juice, and discovered that something happened when she did. Something changed in her, in others, in the world. She did not understand it at first. She only knew that people looked at her differently when she wore the red, that they listened more carefully, that they remembered what she said. She did not know why. She only knew it worked. So she kept doing it, day after day, week after week, year after year. The red deepened. The effect grew stronger. The people around her became different, not controlled, not possessed, nothing so obvious, just influenced. Their thoughts bent slightly in her direction. Their decisions included her without their knowledge. Their memories of her became brighter, sharper, more important than memories of anyone else. She became the center of their world without them ever realizing it. And then something noticed, something that had been watching since the beginning, something that had been waiting for someone to discover the true power of red. The old stories do not say what that something was. They do not name it or describe it or explain where it came from. They only say that it answered, that it came when she called, that it entered her and changed her and made her into something that was no longer entirely human. And that is why, on certain evenings, just before sunset, you can still see her walking through the garden, still wearing the red, still waiting, still calling for someone else to discover what she discovered, for someone else to open the door, for someone else to answer. If you have made it this far, something kept you here. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the story itself. Maybe it was the way the words fit together, the rhythm of the telling, the questions that opened and have not yet closed. Or maybe it was something else, something older, something that remembers the garden, something that knows the power of red. The platforms you use every day know about this power. They measure it. They optimize for it. They have teams of engineers and psychologists and data scientists whose only job is to figure out how to keep you watching just a little longer. They test colors. They test thumbnails. They test the precise shade of red that makes you click. They have built billion-dollar companies on the back of this knowledge, but they did not invent it. They borrowed it from the oldest part of your brain, the part that cannot look away from red, the part that remembers Sarah, even if you have never heard her name, the part that knows somehow that the color on a woman's lips is not just color. It is door. It is invitation. It is the thing that calls to something in the dark. If you enjoyed this story, if it held you, kept you, made you want to know what happens next, then tap the like button. Not because it helps the algorithm, not because the platform wants you to, but because the act of liking is an act of attention, and attention is what this story is about. Attention is what Sarah discovered. Attention is what the platforms want from you. Attention is the most valuable thing in the world, and you just gave it to me for 2 hours. Think about that. Think about what kept you here. Think about the color red. Think about the woman in the garden. And then ask yourself, who is really in control of your attention? You, or something that learned to use red long before you were born? If this story stirred something in you, if you felt that pull, that hunger, that need to know what happens next, then you understand now. You understand why red works. You understand why you cannot look away. You understand what Sarah discovered all those years ago in her garden of tomatoes and silence. She discovered that attention is not given. It is taken by those who know how to take it. And now you know too. So share this video with someone who needs to understand the power of red. Share it with someone who has ever wondered why they cannot stop looking, cannot stop watching, cannot stop scrolling. Share it with someone who needs to know that the forces shaping their attention are older than they imagine. And then follow for more stories about the hidden origins of ordinary things, because there are many everyday things around us with strange beginnings that people rarely talk about. The food on your table, the clothes on your back, the color on your lips, the images that stick in your mind long after you have seen them. Each one has a story. Each one comes from somewhere. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the somewhere is darker than you can imagine. Here in this place, we explore them all. So stay close, stay curious, and always return here